4 witnesses swore under oath that they saw Jones with the Suburban after the murder, and 2 described him wearing a white t-shirt and red bandana. The murder weapon was found in Julius Jones's bedroom at his parents' house. It was hidden in the ceiling space with a red bandana wrapped around it. The bandana was later tested, and Jones's DNA was found on it. DNA doesn't lie, and Amanda Bass doesn't know what I saw that night. There are 10 ways to spot a sociopath. Sociopaths are charming. They are spontaneous and intense. Sociopaths don't feel shame, guilt, or remorse. Sociopaths invent outrageous lies. Sociopaths seek to win at all costs. They tend to be highly intelligent. They are incapable of love. They speak poetically. Sociopaths never sincerely apologize. And sociopaths are delusional and believe that whatever they say is the truth. If this doesn't describe Julius Jones, I don't know what does. When you are a sociopath, you don't change. He is the same person today as he was 22 years ago. Jones has never tried to better himself while in prison. He's still getting into trouble. He's still in the gang. He's still lying. He's still making money off his situation, and he still feels no shame, guilt, or remorse for his actions. Being the victim of a violent crime changes you. For me, I don't trust or feel comfortable in situations that I'm not familiar with. You never feel safe. You are always wondering what will happen next. With Jones, his supporters, social media, and his defense team continually spreading lies and half-truths about this murder, you never get away from the tragedy of losing your brother. It's hurtful, and we are continually being re-victimized. We need this to end for our family. We need Julius Jones to be held responsible. When deciding this outcome, if you take any consideration in the criminals who have come forward with supposed information about Christopher Jordan, then you need to take into consideration what James Stevens, one of Jones's cellmates, was willing to testify to. He said Jones stated that he should have killed everybody in the car, and then there would have been nobody to describe the robber to the police. Yes, I am scared for my life. Connie Ellison was not Paul's girlfriend and only befriended our family and our parents and family after his murder. Fact, the night before the murder, Paul told Connie that he wasn't going to be seeing her outside of AA because he wanted to concentrate on his girls. Connie was not a part of our family. She has no right to make assumptions of what my parents and Paul would have wanted. She brings no new evidence to the table. My parents were devastated over my brother's murder and strongly believed in Jones's conviction and sentence. Julius Jones murdered Paul Howell, a totally innocent victim, in an execution-style murder, never giving him a chance to turn over the keys. Jones did this out of greed and for personal profit. He has never apologized or acknowledged his participation. Jones knew his punishment for murder. He chose his outcome.
Hello, I'm a niece of Paul Howell, who was murdered by Julius Jones. I remember the night of July 28, 1999, like it was yesterday, because it was a day that I lost my faith. I lost my faith because there is no higher purpose that God could have for my Uncle Paul, more purposeful than what he was doing while he was still alive. That being the most loving father, adoring uncle, son, brother, friend, mentor, and savior to many. At his funeral, I had what felt like hundreds of people tell me that my uncle saved their life. I will say that again. Paul Howell saved lives. I had 24 years with my uncle, many of which I saw him on a daily basis. His 2 daughters got a quarter of that time. In your last clemency hearing, you spoke about aggravating and mitigating factors. The aggravating factors far outweigh the mitigating factors in this case. 3 felony convictions, assault of a detention officer, 2 armed carjackings, robbery, possession of a firearm and stolen vehicle, attempting to elude, and possession of stolen property, all of which were committed prior to Julius Jones murdering my uncle for his car. One misconduct should have automatically disqualified him for a commutation, but here we are. You spoke about an inmate showing remorse and whether an inmate is still a physical threat and danger to society. Numerous felonies involving a firearm, knowing Julius Jones is a high-ranking and active gang member, multiple misconducts, you have your answer. Yes, Julius Jones is still a physical threat to society. Julius Jones has shown absolutely no remorse for his involvement in actions in Paul's murder despite overwhelming evidence. I ask you, what facts in this case justify clemency? Your vision statement says that you promote and utilize fair and equitable decision-making, reducing the risk to the public and including victims' concerns, except all of my family's concerns and the concerns of the many men and women that work tirelessly on this case have fallen on deaf ears or on ears that have been gaslighted by celebrities, political and professional advancement, and the outright distortion of the truth. I used to be prideful of my last name, and now it terrifies me because in the public's eye, we are the criminals. Yet Paul Howell and my entire family are the victims here. Your values state an ethical, unbiased professional performance of duties. The section pertaining to conflicts of interest of a board member states that if a board member who is biased, prejudiced, or has a conflict of interest shall recuse himself or herself. Scott Williams, I do thank you for upholding those rules and values. I can only hope that this board will see through these blatant misrepresentations of the truth and live up to your own mission, vision, and values put forth to you. Abide by your rules this time and vote no to the clemency of Julius Jones. For if you do not, then the entire state of Oklahoma should be afraid. Please do not let the lies outweigh the truth here. Booker T. Washington said, "A lie does not become truth, a wrong does not become right, and evil does not become good just because it is accepted by a majority." I believe those are wise words to live by. Thank you.
My name is Brian Howell, and I'm Paul Howell's brother. The Oklahoma Pardon and Parole Board serves the citizens of Oklahoma by making careful and informed decisions, focusing on public safety, offender accountability, and reentry and victims' rights. That is the mission statement of your board. After stalking my brother, Julius Jones, without a single word, ambushed and murdered him by firing a gun into the left side of his head in front of his daughters and sister in my parents' driveway. He then fired a second gunshot at the girls as they ran for safety and backed the stolen Suburban over his body, crushing his legs as he fled the scene. All of this for the money he might receive from a stolen car. This board is well aware that Jones's guilty verdict and death sentence were handed down by a unanimous jury after a lengthy and fair trial, and that his case was appealed and reviewed by 13 judges, 4 courts, and upheld without a single dissent. You also know that the Supreme Court refused to hear this case a total of 4 times. You've heard what the defense is claiming. You know what the proven facts are presented by the state. You know you now have a chance for the first time to question Julius Jones himself about my brother's murder. Give our family the courtesy of asking the tough and meaningful questions that we deserve to be asked. Ask Julius Jones if he was ever an honor student or played football at OU. Have him explain his past criminal behavior, his 3 felony convictions, and his extensive arrest record prior to the murder of my brother, including the 2 armed carjackings only days before. Why did he reach for a loaded gun in the stolen Honda that he was driving? What was he doing lurking behind an ATM with a fake gun at 3 a.m.? Why did he accuse Christopher Jordan of stealing the hideaway Mercedes when he pled guilty to that crime and he was seen driving it? Ask him why during all of this trial and appeals he chose not to testify and never told anyone that he was at home. Ask why he told his attorneys unequivocally that he was not at home the night of the murder. Have him explain the 3 independent eyewitnesses that testified that they saw Julius Jones with Paul Hal Suburban the night of the murder, and the 2 other independent eyewitnesses that refute the false alibi claims of his parents and sister that they were all together that night, with testimony and dated evidence that their gathering was the night before Paul's murder. How does he explain Megan Toby's eyewitness description that fits Julius Jones, that the shooter did not have cornrows, that she also identified a stocking cap, a red bandana, a white t-shirt, all found in his bedroom, along with a murder weapon wrapped in the red bandana that contained only his DNA? Why did he write letters from jail to his girlfriend that threatened her to lie about his whereabouts and her knowledge of this illegal activity, actually reflecting an awareness of his own guilt? Why do his lawyers say that there's a plea deal for Christopher Jordan when they know Jordan served his full 30-year sentence as calculated and documented by the Oklahoma Department of Corrections and confirmed by his own lawyers? Ask him to explain why his DNA was found on the red bandana and why Christopher Jordan's DNA was not on the red bandana. The DNA analysis of the red bandana that was found wrapped around the murder weapon, discovered hidden in his home, along with ammunition, and identified positively as that of Julius Jones, with the probability of randomly selecting to be 1 in 110 million in the U.S. African-American population, a fact that their selected lab, and their selected expert confirmed. Why did Amanda Bass knowingly need to make unethical and false statements to the board at the commutation hearing regarding the validity of that DNA? Ask Julius Jones why he continues to violate prison rules and why he is actively involved in gang activity and classified as a security threat. Have him tell you how much profit he has made for himself, his family, and his friends from his notoriety while in prison. Ask him where did he get his tattoos and what they mean. Ask him why did 1 inmate and 1 witness state that they knew a little girl waved at him from the backseat of the Suburban if you didn't tell them and if you weren't at home, or if you were at home. Ask him why he murdered my brother. Again, to say that Julius Jones is overwhelmingly guilty of the murder of Paul Hal is truly an understatement. Our family would ask the members of the Pardon and Parole Board one question: what is it that makes you doubt the guilt of Julius Jones? The defenders of Julius Jones have repeatedly and consistently been proven to be untruthful and unethical, and they continue to rely on false information regarding this case. Even Julius Jones's original trial defense lawyer has spoken out publicly about the lies and the unethical tactics used by Jones's current lawyers and their social media campaign. All we ask is for you to honestly and fairly evaluate the facts and evidence contained in the Attorney General's clemency packet and the trial transcripts. Support the efforts and work of law enforcement, prosecutors, jurors, judges, and the courts. Don't let lies allow a guilty, violent criminal to potentially be released and endanger the safety of our family and all Oklahomans. Julius Jones was never an innocent bystander, duped and framed for the murder of my brother, as the lies of his defenders would have you believe. He was and continues to be a pathological liar, a violent sociopath, and a gang member and a coward that refuses to accept responsibility for his actions and his criminal behavior, to ignore the facts and truth of this case, to be fooled by the deception of his defense team, to be influenced by uninformed celebrities and social media supporters, and to offer Julius Jones any relief from his sentence through clemency or commutation would be a violation of justice, a shameful disrespect of the law and the people who enforce and uphold those laws, and a direct threat to the safety of our family and the people of Oklahoma. Your responsibility lies in your mission statement. Make careful and informed decisions. Protect the people of Oklahoma. Hold the offender accountable and uphold the rights of the victims. Julius Jones's proven actions, both then and now, show that he does not deserve clemency.
All right, got to talk about this fast. I'm Rachel Howell. I'm Paul Howell's daughter. I'm going to focus mostly on an interaction I had with a Justice for Julius supporter. The supporter reached out to our family's social media page a few weeks ago. The beginning of his message read, "I have marched for Julius numerous times, including the other day, which was on TV. I have never read the transcripts of this case, as most of his supporters have not. After careful consideration of the evidence at hand, I've completely changed my position. I am so sorry for you, for your family, just so sorry. I want to apologize for my role in misleading people about this case. I have a bunch of close friends that are leading the charge for Julius, and I am no longer participating. After reading his initial message, I wrote back to him, thanking him for researching this case and that it's messages like these that make me smile on hard days. It was just another confirmation of how misleading this campaign has been to even its own followers. Julius Jones, his family, and his legal team have been completely manipulating the public and preying on the gullible and good citizens of America. The former supporter went on to say a few more things. He said, I've had a rough couple days with it. I marched for a murderer. They have framed it as a black versus white case, and it's nothing like that at all. He mentioned to me that he is friends with the two main people doing it and that he doesn't know what to think of them at the moment. He went on to say, the facts speak to Julius being the killer, and that's just what it is. I had no clue he was guilty of a robbery with a deadly weapon. I looked up his entire history, and then I sat and cried, he said. In that moment, I realized how misinformed some of these supporters are. Yes, I knew that most of the supporters didn't understand who they were advocating for, but it was a moment of better understanding of this entire situation. The former supporter went on to say how bad he feels about how him and the Justice for Julius supporters talk about my family and I, how they talk about you. It makes me feel so sick, how I talked about you. They paint your family as racist, he said. The former supporter also says he believes this campaign is taking advantage of the Black Lives Matter movement. He said, I think Julius and family and friends, they have taken advantage of the BLM movement, turned it into a weapon. It's a gross distortion, and I won't be a part of it anymore. Honestly, this makes complete sense. This isn't about race. A man murdered another innocent man in front of his sister and two young daughters. It doesn't matter the color of his skin, black or white, a man killed another man. I could feel the hurt he was feeling in his messages to me. I could tell he had just found out a lot of factual information about Julius Jones, and he was processing everything. You could tell he was feeling hurt, betrayed, and even violated. Julius Jones has taken full advantage of everyone in his life and in this situation, including you, the board members here today. And I am here to warn you, he is not innocent. He is not a mentor and will never be a mentor to this community. Would you have this man over to your house with your family around your children? What if this was your family member that was murdered, all for a car, remind you? This is terrifying. This is a matter of public safety, and this is worrisome for not just my family and I, but for the entire community here in Oklahoma. My family does not deserve this. We have done nothing wrong. The former supporter went on to say a few more things. He said, the fact that you're so forgiving, that you can say that, I wish all Julius Jones supporters could talk to you like this. You need to be heard. I admire you. It was a delicate moment between me and this former supporter, two human beings having a moment of clarity and connection. I told him that I didn't blame him for his role in this campaign. And he said, I thought it would be important for you to hear this from me. And it was.
Okay. I also have copies of the questions that we might.
Just 1 second, Mr. Hill.
That's appropriate.
Okay, just 1 second. We've reached the end of the 20 minutes. Now we'll open it up for questions to members of the victims representatives group. Mr. Howell, were you saying something?
I've got copies of the questions that we thought would be appropriate to ask Julius Jones. I'll be happy to give them to the board if that would be appropriate.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do any board members have questions? Okay, hearing none, thank you again for coming today. We're going to take, again, another short recess and allow the victims' representatives to be reseated.
I don't know about y'all, but this sounds like a whole bunch of bullshit. It's a pause. We're live with the audio, I promise you. They're doing a pause for letting the families, victims, I guess, to sit down or whatever. They just did that, but they're doing it again. So it sounds like they're just bashing Julius Jones. I haven't heard one person on the behalf of Julius Jones. And then the statements that they have made about the hair or anything, they're just trying to recover it, basically. So if you're listening to what she was saying, she said a supporter. She didn't even identify the person. That's the thing. It's just a unknown supporter. Basically, she made it up and saying that somebody was supporting Julius Jones, and then found out about the case, and then saying that he's not supporting. Man, stop with that. Stop with that. It's plenty of people who have read the transcripts. Plenty of people have did a lot of research, more research than probably some of the lawyers that's in the case. It's people that's really involved into this case, and they're backtracking a lot of statements. So, fucking pissing me off. And then mentioning other cases that have nothing to do with this one is a prime example of them trying to make you feel like he's guilty automatically. If he did something to this case, they would only be talking about this case. Point the fucking... I hate people. Make it on my nerves. It just doesn't make any sense. Julius is 100% guilty. It's called evidence. Okay. I'll let you call it. I'll let you tell it. Where's all the evidence at? Since you know so much about the case, send me all the links to all these evidence that they have against Julius Jones. And don't just tell me about some damn DNA about a bandana. You should be able to have more DNA than just a bandana. You should have more evidence than then he say, she say shit. You know what I'm saying? If this is not 1970s or 1950s, it's some type of real evidence.
Okay, it is 11:33. The hearing is out of recess. The chair now recognizes the legal representatives for Mr. Jones for your 5-minute rebuttal time.
Thank you.
We can begin the timers.
So first, Ms. Crabb pointed out that at volume 7, page 157, Kermit Lottie testified about his involvement in the Paris Powell case. That is false. I have it pulled up on my screen, and all he testifies is that he recognizes a letter that he sent to Sandra Elliott. That is it. Ms. Crabb also pointed out that Christopher Jordan's testimony was sufficiently corroborated by Liddell King, and that accomplice testimony needs to be corroborated under Oklahoma law. Well, that is precisely why Liddell King was not charged as an accomplice or as a co-conspirator in this case, so that he could corroborate Christopher Jordan's statements. If Liddell King had been charged, as he should have been, given that he put himself with the Suburban on the night of Mr. Howell's death and admitted that he tried to sell it after the fact, why was he not charged at all? We submit it's because the prosecution needed him to corroborate Christopher Jordan's testimony. They point out that Gordon Owens identified Julius on the night of the crime with the Suburban. They fail to point out that when asked to identify Julius in court, Gordon Owens could not point him out. They also fail to mention that Gordon Owens was a convicted felon, and though the state had been required by the trial court to disclose the felony convictions of its witnesses, as with all prospective jurors, it failed to do so. And as a result, counsel was unable to impeach Gordon Owens on that basis. They talk about Annalise Presley and the damaging, allegedly, statements Julius made to her. We would point the board to the video submission of Annalise Presley, where she discusses the ways in which the prosecution did not allow her to elaborate in order to provide the full context around her responses, and threatened to put her in jail, hold her in contempt, and told her that she would have her baby in jail if she didn't comply. The 25 caliber bullets in the black Buick, what the state fails to mention is that the state stipulated to the fact that those bullets were found wrapped in a white and black bandana that had Christopher Jordan's DNA on it. That's a stipulation that was entered into the record at trial.
Thank you.
Respectfully, Rachel Howell claims to have identified Julius Jones on the night of the crime. There is no indication in any police report anywhere that that second eyewitness identification was ever provided to the police or prosecutors at any point.
Facts.
Shelley Levisay, the host of the podcast that you heard excerpts of, was suspended from the practice of law by the Oklahoma Bar Association and Supreme Court in around 2019, I believe it was. And she was also accused of harboring a fugitive who was also a former client. So take that for what it's worth. I would also just point out with respect to the uncharged conduct. The state has pointed out that Julius attempted to elude the police and was found with a toy gun on his person when he was 18 years old. What they don't say is that those charges were dismissed on January 14th, 2000 by the Cleveland County District Court. They also argue that Julius was found with car tools and spinners in his vehicle after being pulled over one night with Desmond Lewis and Gino Chambers in the car. They don't mention that that too was investigated and ultimately dismissed. Julius was never charged. Same thing with the armed robbery of the Quail Springs Mall jewelry store. They concede that that is based only on Christopher Jordan's testimony and also on the testimony of the store owner, who all he could say was that he was robbed by a black man at gunpoint. Again, Julius was never charged with that robbery, and it's pretty obvious why. Dillard's, same thing. Julius was never charged after having stolen some retail items from a Dillard's. The state claims that he committed the hideaway armed carjacking involving the Lexus, but what they don't say is that that was a red Lexus that was stolen in that carjacking, and that Julius's girlfriend testified that he had mentioned at some point that she could look good in a white Lexus, another important distinction. The state also claims that Julius has been engaged in illegal activities throughout prison through the phones. I highly doubt that Warden Ferris would be allowing illegal financial transactions to be going on through his prison phones. There's no documentation supporting the affidavit of an investigator from Prater's office to support those charges.
On DNA, we had very little time, but I'd like to make the point. If you look at Dr. Eli Shapiro's 2019 report, and he cites both paragraph 22 from the CODIS National Database and also
Mr. Tronsky, we've reached the end of your 5-minute rebuttal time.
right. What's
Thank
that?
you. We've reached the end of your time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Wow. They
Do any of your
get
board members have any questions?
30 minutes
have
to bash
a question
Julius
and a comment.
Jones and say all this
You
shit,
stated
and
that there
the
was a
rebuttal was 5
stipulation
minutes.
on the bullets wrapped. Where's that in the transcript?
I can point it,
Wow, bro.
I can, let me see. Just give me 1 second.
Okay.
While she's looking for that, I have a question regarding the DNA.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Crabb stated that, I'm trying to remember her exact words. I certainly don't want to misspeak, but there was some, I don't think she went as far as saying that it was absolutely conclusive that it was Jones's DNA that was on the red bandana. But there was some indication that there might have been DNA from some other individuals, unidentified, and I did not hear anyone completely rule out that it might have been Jordan's DNA.
Yes, I can address that. She did say there were 3 or more, I think, minor profiles in addition to the major profile. There are at least 2 or more of those. The point of this was to look for Christopher Jordan's DNA. So we know that there are 3 or more people's DNA on the bandana. We know Christopher Jordan is not the major profile, and there's not enough information to exclude him from the minor profiles, for which there are 2 or more. So it was so degraded. It was all very highly degraded. But the minor profiles, we know there are additional people there, and that's all consistent. The major profile and the minor profile are consistent with trace and touch DNA. Somebody touches it. She referenced that it's been tested for semen, had been tested for saliva, which you look for a connection with bodily fluids. There's no connection with bodily fluids based on the testing here. So you look then to trace DNA, and the fact that it was found in his room If you look at Eli Shapiro's article, which is attached, it's a 2013 reference, which talks about scientific studies in a peer-reviewed journal that explain that DNA can be, as we know from COVID, if I cough, if you're not 6 feet away from me, you might get the virus. If I speak or cough, there are studies, if I'm standing within a meter of me when I'm speaking, they find DNA on the floor, my DNA. There are other studies that show if I'm holding this pencil for a short period of time, even after I wash my hands and the pencil is rubbed up against somebody's clothes, my DNA is found on their clothes. And so the point in Eli Shapiro's report was that with trace DNA, which this is understood to be small quantities of something not attributable to bodily fluids like this, it is explained by the fact that it's in his room, and the CODIS wouldn't even take this as forensic evidence. If you look at their question and answer 22 in the attachment to Dr. Shapiro's report, if it's taken from a subject or a subject's room, you would expect their DNA to be on it. It's not crime scene evidence anymore. The point of this was to look for Chris Jordan's DNA, and it was so degraded. We found additional people that could be him, but we can't include him. We can't exclude him.
Just answering Mr. Smotherman, your question. The stipulation is located at trial volume 9. That's February 22nd, 2002, pages 214 through 215.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from board members? Hearing none, this concludes the rebuttal time. Thank you. Okay, as I mentioned at the beginning of the hearing, the board received notice on October 1st, 2021 that Julius Jones elected to appear before the board. So we will now recognize Julius Jones to address the board for 20 minutes. And we'll begin once he is here.
That is crazy, bro.
So, yeah.
They get 5 minutes. Well, they just been
Okay.
bashing.
Mr. Jones, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me properly?
Yes, I can. All right. Have you been viewing and hearing the proceedings this morning?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. So you know that you've got 20 minutes to address the board. We will also have time for questions at the end of that if any board members have questions. Are you ready to begin?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And we're going to start the timer and you can begin now.
Good morning to the honorable members of this board and to the honorable Governor Stitt. I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. My name is Julius Jones, and this is the first chance that I've had in over 20 years to talk about what happened and where I was on the night Mr. Paul Howell was senselessly murdered. I want to be clear about two things. First, I feel for the Howell family and for the tragic loss of Mr. Paul Howell, who I've heard was a caring and all-around good person and father. Second, I am not the person responsible for taking Mr. Howell's life. I was not involved in the planning of this robbery. I was not present during this robbery, and I did not know that anyone had been killed until the day after Mr. Howell was murdered. I'm going to try to give you a better sense of who I was at the time. I was 19 years old and trying to work my way off of academic probation at OU. The year before, I had received a presidential leadership class scholarship to attend OU because of my athletic and academic achievements while at John Marshall High School. I had graduated 11th in my class with a 3.68 GPA. I had also played varsity basketball and football. During my sophomore year, I was proud to be part of making John Marshall sports history with my teammates when we won state championships in football and basketball while going undefeated in each of these sports that season. That's the only time this had been done in state history. Throughout my high school years, I played under the tutelage of Coach Tommy Griffin, who demanded a lot from his players on and off the court. Coach Griffin also expected a lot from me in particular. He would hold study hall before practice, and I was one of the players he called upon to tutor my teammates in subjects they were struggling with. He expected me not only to be a teammate, but a captain and a mentor as well. At the time, I thought Coach Griffin was being unfair to me by being so hard on me and having expectations of me that he didn't have for others. But looking back, I realized that Coach Griffin was hard on me because he seen something in me that I didn't see in myself. My best friend since childhood and throughout my time at John Marshall was Jimmy Lawson. Jimmy's dad was a preacher, and like my own father, had served in the military. Our parents were strict and demanded only excellence out of us. They pushed us to be the very best we could be academically, and we both graduated in the top 10% of our class. I first met Chris Jordan during my junior year at John Marshall when he enrolled to start playing basketball with us. Chris was rough around the edges. The rumor was he had been kicked out of his previous school, and pretty much it was known he was gaming. I recall that at one point Chris was kicked out of John Marshall for fighting. Although Chris and I played basketball together for a couple of years at John Marshall, we really weren't friends and didn't run in the same circles. It was during my last year at John Marshall that I started to lose focus. My older brother, Antonio, who was 2 years ahead of me, was already playing football at OU. And through him, I was able to meet and spend time around older guys who were the Division I athletes I aspired to be. People like Eduardo Nahara and Michael Johnson. Even though I was still in high school, I was able to play in unofficial off-season camps at OU and hope to play Division I basketball there the following year. Being exposed to the world of Division I sports at 17 and 18 years old exposed me not only to the greatest athletes, but also to people who had nice things that I wanted to have, but that my parents couldn't afford. Now, my family wasn't poor, but we didn't have a lot of money. My mom was a public school teacher and has been for the past 40 plus years. And my dad worked construction after his military service. They worked hard to provide for me and my siblings. And we never missed meals. But they also weren't rich and didn't have a lot of money to buy all the things that I saw people my age or a little older with and that I thought I needed in order to fit in, or rather to stand out. So I started to shoplift in order to have nice things that were beyond my means, and to impress the ladies who I thought would like me more for what I had and for what I could give them, rather than for who I was as a person. I stole things that I could wear or resell, like clothes, pages, necklaces, CDs, shoes, and I also took tests for people using fake IDs for a fee. Now make no mistake, there is no excuse for my illegal, deliberate, and foolish decisions at the U. I'm just trying to help you better understand who I was at the age of 16, 17, 18 years old when all this happened. And I acknowledge the wrong that I did with the hope that other young men and women will see me, hear me, and do better by avoiding the same mistakes that I made and prioritizing the right things in life. During my first year at OU, I got a girl pregnant and school stopped being my first focus. I missed basketball tryouts, my grades took a nosedive, and after the 1998 fall semester, I was put on academic probation. In early 1999, I bumped into Chris Jordan at a John Marshall basketball game. He wasn't in school at the time and expressed he wanted to play basketball in Houston, but that he couldn't pass the ACTs to get into college. So I told Chris I had an idea. He could pay me some money and I'd help him get into college by taking the ACT for him. This is how we started hanging around each other. I distinctly remember Jimmy coming back from Grambling State to go to school here in Oklahoma and getting on my case about being around Chris. He reminded me that we didn't hang around Chris because he was bad news for a reason. Despite my best friend's warnings and my better judgment, Chris was someone I wanted to help. I wanted to help him have the same opportunities we had to go to school and play basketball. And he was willing to pay me to help him do that. And I needed money to support the child I believe I had on the way. So I abandoned the values I was raised with and continued to hang around Chris, ignoring the wrong I knew he was up to, because I didn't think he could affect me. I wasn't doing it with him. Every day for the past 22 years, I have regretted these decisions. And I hope my story can be a lesson for all young people that keeping the wrong company and sacrificing your values for a few bucks comes at a very high price. It can cost you 22 years of your life, or it can literally cause your death. Wednesday, July 28, 1999 was the beginning of the end of my life. I had just celebrated my 19th birthday on Sunday. A friend of mine, Erica, had dropped off a belated birthday present to me on Tuesday. It was a large birthday cookie. I spent that Wednesday evening at my parents' home playing games with my sister, Antoinette, and my brother, Antonio. My mom fixed spaghetti, and after we ate, my brother and I played dominoes while my mom fixed my sister's hair. My brother, Antonio, worked the overnight shift at Texaco Travel Stop at the time. His shift started at 10 p.m. and he was off by 6 in the morning. My mom left the house to take my brother to work between 9:30 and 10 p.m. I can remember sitting on my parents' staircase talking to my mother before she left to take my brother to work. I was at home with my mom and dad when my sister left, and I was at home with them when she got back. While my mom was gone, I found out that my siblings had eaten most of my birthday cookie, which I had been trying to save behind my back. I remember complaining to her about this when she walked in the back door. I fell asleep waiting on Chris to come pick me up later that night because the transmission leak on my car hadn't been fixed. And I needed to pick up some clean clothes from my apartment in Norman, near OU's campus. Chris picked me up between 11 and 11:30 that night. I was pissed that he was so late. We had words after I got into the car, and I asked him where he'd been. He looked off and told me that he'd gotten into it with some guys and shot them. I was shocked, but I didn't ask more questions, thinking the less I knew, the better. I picked up some clean clothes in my apartment in Norman, and then I went with Chris to his older brother Lamon's apartment on the south side of Oklahoma City. We hung out there for a while, drinking, talking, and playing dominoes. And then I called my girlfriend Annalise from Lamon's apartment, and I fell asleep at some point. Early the next morning, Chris drove me to pick up my car to take to another auto shop for the transmission repair. Then he dropped me off at my parents' house. Back in my parents' house, I went back to sleep. After waking up, sometime during the afternoon, Liddell King, who I just met just a few weeks earlier through Chris, paged me looking for Chris. I told him I didn't know where Chris was at, and I had last seen him earlier that morning. Eventually, Liddell told me he needed help moving the car and led me to believe he would give me money if I helped him move it. I wanted money, so I agreed. Liddell picked me up from my parents' house and drove me over to his apartments where Suburban was parked. He asked me to follow him in the Suburban, and I refused, since I was fairly certain the car was stolen, based on what I heard how he went to prison before for having stolen parts on his car and get wrecked. Since I wouldn't get inside the Suburban, Liddell drove instead. I followed him driving his red Firebird. Liddell parked the Suburban outside of a grocery store I had never been to before and then went inside. I only waited for about a minute or so, but it felt like forever. So I went in to see what Liddell was doing. I can't remember if he bought anything, but when I walked in the store, he finally walked out. Liddell left the Suburban where it was. He got into the Firebird with me and he drove us over to an auto shop not too far away from the grocery store. Liddell got out of the car and went into the garage while I waited in the car. He came back a little later looking spooked and didn't say a word to me. He drove over in silence back to where the Suburban was parked and sat behind it for a minute or two. When he finally spoke, he told me that the shop didn't want the Suburban because there was a body on it. I took that to probably mean someone had been shot or killed. I know at this point I should have gone to the police. I didn't because I was scared. I didn't know what the devil was talking about, and I think that I could get in trouble for helping him move the vehicle. I regretted that decision also for the past 22 years. Liddell wanted to find Chris and ultimately found him in Mecklenburg Rec Center, where we often go and play basketball. When I finally walked into the gym, they appeared to be in the middle of a very serious discussion. Liddell ended up leaving by himself, and Chris told me he had something to go do. He took me back to my parents' house and then wanted to use the phone. And while he was waiting for a call back, he asked to see the news. That's when I learned that a man had been shot and killed in Evan the night before during the robbery of Suburban. It was at this point that things started to add up to me that Chris and Liddell were involved in this. It was stupid of me and naive of me not to go to the police with what I knew, but I was scared. I didn't know what to say at the time, not just for myself, but for my family as well. It was after midnight, maybe 1 a.m., early Friday morning, when Chris called and asked me to come pick him up because he was locked out of his grandmother's house. I went and picked him up and drove back to my parents' house. I stayed downstairs on the couch using the phone, while Chris ended up going upstairs to use the phone in my own bedroom. By the time I woke up later that Friday morning, Chris had already left. Since my dad had been asking me to cut the grass, I did that, and then I made plans to meet up with a girl named Jamila later on. While talking with her on the phone, I received a call on the other line, and it turned out to be Liddell. I thought it was weird that he wanted to know what I was doing. After talking with him, I ended up getting another phone call. This person identified himself as Detective Flowers and asked if I was home. I knew something wasn't right, and I told him that Julius wasn't there, and I hung up. I left out of my parents' house through the back door to go find Chris, figuring the calls I had gotten had something to do with him. When I found Chris, he said that he needed to go to Liddell's apartment to find out what was going on. Liddell's girlfriend told us the police had already taken Liddell, and Chris told her that he straightened everything out. After we got back in the car, he asked me to go warn his brother Layman that the police were looking for him. Since I was trying to avoid the police, I did that and stayed at Layman's apartment overnight because I saw the news and I was afraid with all the police outside my parents' house. I told my girlfriend Annalise that I needed to try to find a lawyer to help me clear my name. I was asleep when the police arrested me early Saturday morning at Layman's apartment. They didn't even give me time to put on a shirt, pulling me out of bed and placing me in handcuffs. What happened after that was a whirlwind. Initially, Barry Albert represented me, but after he died in October of 2000, 3 new lawyers were assigned to represent me. I spent very little time with any of them except Robin McPhail, who was the youngest lawyer on the team, and spent most of the time coming to the county jail to visit me about my case. She understood that I was at my parents' house at the time Mr. Howell was shot and had only gone to the south side much later that night. The lead lawyer on my case, David McKenzie, rarely came to the county jail to visit me at all. He usually spoke to me in court on my designated court dates, and that's about it. Those conversations were usually brief, like 5 to 10 minutes or so. At no time did I ever tell him I was not at my parents' house when Mr. Howell was shot. If he thought I told him something different, he's wrong. And had he spoken to me more than a few times, he would have known that. He would have also known I wanted to testify. In fact, up until he rested my case without putting on any evidence of my defense, I thought I was going to testify and explain to the jury exactly where I was at and what I had did and didn't do. Instead, David McKenzie rested my case without consulting me at all. Seeing that I was upset, he reminded me not to make a scene in front of the jury. He had told me before my trial that if I showed too much emotions, the jury could execute me. So when I went before Judge Bass, I felt trapped when he asked me, was it my choice not to testify? I told him that yes, it was my choice, but in reality, I was just following my lawyer's advice, trying not to make a scene in front of the jury. I am here before you today to tell you what I never got to tell the jury in my trial. Yes, I've made many mistakes in my youth, but I did not kill Mr. Paul Howell. I hope that my experiences of being convicted and sentenced to die for something I didn't do because I chose to hang around the wrong people and lost sight of what mattered most, not fully understanding the impact of my choices, can be a lesson to young people facing the same social and economic pressures I faced. In the many years I have survived behind bars, time and time again, I have relied on the values my parents instilled in me and my siblings growing up. From my mom and my dad, I learned the importance of giving back. My mom is a public school teacher. Her passion for education and helping others has stood out to me since I was little. She has worn her heart on her sleeve and has shared it with so many. My dad is the same way, whether he was coaching me, my siblings, or our friends, or supporting us from the sidelines. He always made sure we got to and from practices and games, and that included taking other kids who needed a ride or some guidance on both. The occasional stop for food also included whichever friends or teammates also needed to eat. Even though I may have seemed as though I wasn't paying attention to what they were imparting, I was. I was listening to the things my parents said and watched the things they did. Over the past 22 years, I have experienced profound sorrow, even despair, as a result of Mr. Howell's death and facing execution for something I didn't do. It was out of that despair and after my appeals were denied that I wrote to Mrs. Tobin. I did so in a desperate attempt to show her that I could not have been the person who took her brother's life based on her own eyewitness description. I truly wish Mr. Howell was alive today. I wish I could turn back time. I wish I had made better decisions in my youth, but I can't change any of that. What I can do is do my part to make the world better. For me, that looks like helping young people recognize and avoid the mistakes I've made, helping them pursue their dreams, because nothing simply happens the way you want it to happen. It requires hard work and perseverance. If my life is spared and my freedom granted, I am grateful for the support I will have from my family and from ARC, the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, for offering to enroll me in all this programming and sending a letter directly to Governor Stitt confirming it all. Part of their mission is to improve the outcomes of formerly incarcerated individuals and building healthier communities. They do this by providing housing, counseling, education, peer support, and job readiness. They have also offered me a paid internship where I can learn computer skills as well as skills in customer service and research. These skills can help me implement my vision of operating a nonprofit to help at-risk youth. I have been fortunate to have had the opportunity already to advance this vision by talking to students and young people around the state and the country about the mistakes I've made and how to avoid them. This is my passion. I don't want any young person to make the same mistakes I've made by associating with the wrong people and being blind to how the ways of life can quickly and dramatically change for the worse. I don't want anyone living with the deep regret I feel about the dumb decisions I've made, like shoplifting for quick money and putting myself in situations to be blamed for things I didn't do. I want to play a part in preventing that for young people. I pray for the opportunity to continue doing this as a contributing member of society and hopefully one day as a free man. Thank you to this pardon and parole board. Thank you to all the people who have taken the time to fully listen to my story and to all those near and far who have supported me over the years. And my sincerest prayers are with the Howe family, always.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jones. At this time, we will open it up for questions from any of the board members.
Mr. Jones, you wrote a letter to Ms. Presley that said, so you're going to have to do something for me now for your, really for your safety. Not that I'm threatening you, but I got some, and I'll skip the wording there. If you do get called to the stand, and this is November 21st of 1999, your best bet is to say you don't remember unless you don't care about me coming home. You agree you wrote that letter, sir?
Yes, sir. But the reason I said what I said was because I was attempting to try to shield her from what I know she was afraid of.
Okay.
It was ill-advised in my youth, but I was not threatening her.
You can certainly see how that looks like you're trying to get her to coach or change her testimony. You can see how that might be read that way, correct?
Yes, sir. But again.
And then again, Mr. Jones, in November 3rd of 2000, you wrote a letter that says, and if you do end up having to testify, do not tell them people that I was doing anything illegal, okay? Just tell them that you really don't know. You wrote that letter as well, did you not, sir?
Yes, sir. Are you finished asking your question?
I'm asking you, did you write that letter?
I'm asking you, are you finished asking your question so I can fully answer it, sir?
Yes. Did you write that letter?
Yes, sir. Again, as I said, I was.
And you did have 25 caliber bullets in your car when it was found. You know that, right?
That's what they say, sir. I never had any 25 caliber bullets.
Okay.
I believe
let's talk about July 29th of 1999. 6 days before Mr. Howe was murdered. Do you recall pleading guilty to taking a Mercedes Benz from Mr. Lapsey?
Are you finished asking your question?
Yes, sir. Did you plead guilty to that crime?
Yes, sir. I ended up pleading guilty to that crime because I originally was represented by Mrs. Gina Walker, who had left the office. And upon her investigation, she was trying to get those charges dismissed because there was really no evidence that I committed that crime. But when they took me back to court in 2006, when I pled guilty to this, I had a new lawyer who I hadn't had for more than 30 days. And the judge told me I was going to trial on Monday. And that wasn't her problem, that I had just got a new lawyer. And I felt the pressure that I had to, because I didn't want to take the chance of getting, convicted of another crime I didn't commit.
Okay, so you pled guilty to that? Yes.
Yes,
okay. And you stated that there was no evidence that was found linking you to that crime, yet the car was found at your apartment complex in Norman, correct?
That's what I'm told. I have never seen that vehicle. I've never been in it.
Okay, you have no reason to dispute that it was found and seen at your apartment complex.
Again, I've never seen it, so I don't know if that's what the police report says, and that's what the police report says. So.
And at that particular crime, you pled guilty and you spelled the word Mercedes with a Z. That is exactly like the tag that was in the car, also spelled with a Z. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
Okay, so there is some evidence linking you to that crime.
No, sir.
Okay.
To
And
answer
that crime that you pled guilty to, you were wearing a bandana. If believed that you pled guilty to the crime, you were wearing a bandana over your face and you pointed a gun at Mr. Lapsey and took that vehicle, which later ended up at your apartment. Is that correct?
I didn't catch all of what you just said, sir. Could you repeat it?
Absolutely. So when you say there was no evidence linking you to that crime, there was evidence linking to the crime, correct? in at least enough that you pled guilty to it?
Again, sir, I explained to you that I had just got a new lawyer, and the judge told me that she was not going to give us any more time.
Okay.
That is the reason why I felt the pressure to plead guilty to that crime. I did not commit that crime. I did not wear bandanas back then. And
Okay.
no bandana that connected me to that robbery.
Let's talk about your alibi. You were present in March of 2005 when that evidentiary hearing was held, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you recall this 3 or 4 days of testimony where your mother and father testified, and I think your siblings testified. You recall all that, do you not, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you also recall Ms. Cujo, who your mother said was there that night, saying that she wasn't there that night, that they were mistaken. You recall her testifying to that, correct?
Yes, sir. I do recall her testifying. She said that she was over in my parents' house that day.
Okay.
She said she wasn't there at the time of the murder.
And specifically, I want to talk about your attorneys, Malcolm Savage and David McKenzie. You were present when they testified at that hearing as well, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And Malcolm, let's start with Malcolm Savage. Malcolm Savage was questioned about whether or not you said, or what your statements were. And he said, quote, "We had information from Mr. Jones himself saying that his parents were mistaken about that night, which night it was, that the night that they were all talking about was the previous night." Do you recall Mr. Savage testifying to that, sir?
Yes, sir.
And you recall him, David McKenzie, also testifying at that hearing, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the question was posed to him now, when your parents were given this description to you, or sorry, when the parents gave this description to you, being David McKenzie, about the claim that they were making, did you discuss that with your client, Julius Jones? To which David McKenzie answers, "I do." And the question is posed to him, tell us about that conversation. The answer is, "I discussed it with him more than once, and he said he was not at home that evening, that his parents must be mistaken." You recall that testimony, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And finally, he says, the question is, Mr. Julius Jones denied to you that he was home the evening of the homicide. And the answer was, "Yes, ma'am." But he was unequivocal that he was not at home with his parents, as his parents had described with regard to the evening that Mr. Howe was murdered. He was not at home. That was testified to, correct?
I believe so, sir. Yes.
By 2 attorneys that were under oath, correct? Your attorneys.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
And you heard them testify to this, but you did not testify at that hearing to what you're claiming now, correct?
I did not testify because my lawyers advised me that this was about a narrow legal issue regarding my lawyer's performance, you know what I'm saying, at trial.
Okay. So finally, I want to ask you just a couple more questions and then I'm done, okay? You just testified that, and you did not testify at your trial, correct?
No, sir, I did not.
And you were aware that a hearing is held and David McKenzie, well, let me just read it. Give me a second. Okay, so you stated that you were
Go ahead, sir.
You ready, sir? Okay. You stated that you were shocked when the defense was arrested and you didn't get to testify, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that you had a hearing in front of Judge Jerry Bass, and I'll just read it to you. You were sworn in at that point, correct? Sworn to tell the truth.
Yes, sir. After my lawyer had already arrested. Yes, sir.
The court says, "Mr. Jones, you heard Mr. McKenzie announce that the defense was resting." Your answer is yes, sir. The court says, "Well, we've all had some discussions about whether or not you were going to testify. We've all had some discussions about whether or not you were going to testify. And that means you're not going to testify. Is that correct?" You answered correct.
And then the court said, all right, you understand that your right to testify is a personal decision of your own. Of course, you may have the advice of counsel, but it is a personal decision whether to testify or not testify on your behalf. Have you determined with the assistance of counsel not to testify? You answered, yes, sir. And the court said, is that a free and personal decision of your own? You said, yes, sir. And then finally, it says, has Mr. McKenzie or anyone else put any pressure on you, coerced you, or made any promises or any benefits to testify? And you said, no, sir. And then your answer was that the question was that this is a choice of your own free will. Your answer was, yes, sir. Is that a pretty accurate description of that hearing?
Yes, but it's leaving out the connotation of what I said a while ago is that my lawyer had informed me before the trial not to show a whole bunch of emotion in front of the jury. So I was terrified to say anything other than what he advised me to say. I don't know the law. I didn't know the law, especially back then. I was only 20, 21 years old. So I did what he told me to do.
I'm sorry, I don't want to talk over you, sir. Were you finished?
Yes, sir. I just said I did what my lawyer advised me to do because I was terrified.
Okay, so you didn't say anything at that hearing because you didn't want to appear emotional or upset in front of the jury.
Yes, sir, because that's what he advised me before the trial.
Okay. Mr. Jones, the jury wasn't present at this hearing. That hearing was outside the presence of the jury. Those hearings are always outside the presence of the jury. The jury wasn't there.
When he asked me, we were standing in the courtroom, sir.
No, but that hearing was outside the presence of the jury, sir. They weren't there. You could have shown whatever emotion or said whatever you wanted to. There was no jury present.
No, sir, that's not true.
It is true, sir. All those things are always outside the presence of the jury. Those discussions are improper to be had in front of a jury.
No, sir, I'm saying that I did not want to show emotion in front of the judge as well. I was terrified.
In front of the judge?
Yes, in front of that. I don't know how court proceedings work. I haven't been in a court like this.
So now your testimony is that it was the judge you were concerned about.
I'm telling you, we were in the courtroom when he asked me these questions, sir. We weren't in the judge's chamber.
Yes, sir. I understand that, but the jury wasn't there.
Mr. Jones, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to talk a little bit about the PIN numbers that you've been using on the phone calls recently. If you could just take a few minutes and explain to us what's going on with that.
So originally, the reason why I used someone else's PIN number was because mine was frozen or wouldn't work. They didn't know what the problem was. I also used someone else's PIN number. The same person. There's never been multiple other people. It's only one other person. And again, they knew that I used this. The counselors here knew that I used this other person's PIN number because I just wanted to talk to my family. I've always just wanted to talk to my family. I mean, I've never been conducting any kind of illegal or illicit business. It's just me to stay in touch with my family.
Okay. Thank you. Do any other board members have questions? Okay, Mr. Jones, we've reviewed this information thoroughly most of this year. We've spent, this is now our second hearing covering this information. It's our first time hearing from you. I know that you've probably thought about this moment for a long time. Is there anything that we have not talked about or asked you about that you would like to discuss with us today?
Just, I would like to address the family in the essence of, I have felt terrible, about their loss. And I don't never want it to get lost that we did not, or me and my family do not recognize that they've lost a loved one. I have, lived with that thought every single day and carried the weight of them hating me for something I didn't even do. I know I have broken the laws, but I've never been a violent man. If you really look at my actual record, it is larceny. It doesn't make it, you know what I'm saying, any better that I just stole things, but I never accosted people. That was not what I was into. But again, I just want to have families to know, man, I do recognize their loss. And I hope at some point they get to heal and to keep cherishing their loved one. And I hope this board gets a chance to really, you know, examine who I am and not the fear that's been talked about me and the hate, because this is not about hate, it's just about the truth. And the truth is, I didn't shoot that man. You know, I didn't kill Mr. Paul Howell. I wasn't involved in it in any way. I wasn't present. I didn't even know he had been killed until after the fact. You know, I wish I could have made better decisions when I was younger. I wish, but I can't change the past. And I mean, that's all I ask you all to consider.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Jones. This is going to conclude this portion of the meeting. And we are going to take a 10-minute recess before reconvening for discussion and final vote. Thank you again for appearing before us today.
Thank you.
Well, they're in a little break. They'll be joining us back in just a little bit. I don't know. Y'all can give y'all thoughts about how y'all feel about it. Yeah, it's a lot. What is roast him? John, you sound real immature, bro. Just what you were texting. It's just, you sound immature. It's sad that they don't have real evidence, like that they can show the world that everybody, it's a lot of people watching this right now. Why would you not just, if y'all have real evidence, why would you not show it? While y'all talking, it ain't hard to show a little screen that shows the evidence that y'all talking about. Like, for real. That's my whole thing about this whole case. It's a whole bunch of she say, he say stuff. It's like no real evidence, nowhere to be found. And DNA is not much of anything. There's been plenty of cases that are failed because of DNA. Just like the dude was explaining, you could be right in front of somebody and talk for 10 seconds, and then your DNA could be right there on a, you know what I'm saying? Like, DNA doesn't show a lot. Me. But I appreciate everybody watching. We're praying for both families. Shout out to Julius Jones' sister, Annette Jones. She's been on one of our podcasts before. White shirt, gun, bullets, gun in this room. Well, for one, Glenn, have you ever heard of placing evidence on criminals or people that you want to be criminals? There's been multiple cases. I know you're probably white, so you probably never had to go through this before, but there's plenty of cases of cops planting evidence. There's plenty of cases where the judge, lawyers, and everybody is involved where they're trying to convict somebody. As you heard them say, once they got that testimony that he was the guy, that's all they needed. They didn't need to keep investigating. They didn't need to keep trying to figure out what's going on. Once they heard one name and somebody said that he did it, that's all they needed to go off of. They need to do their job better. You should have a lot more evidence besides just people saying shit. It should be something besides just saying, oh, his DNA was on a bandana. So what? I'm pretty sure it was other people's evidence, just like they said, DNA was on that bandana. In a car, like, somebody can steal a car and take it anywhere. If I'm trying to set up somebody, I'm going to go take the car to the person I'm trying to set it up to. Then, as you heard, it's another guy involved. And we have a link. I'm about to go find the link that he was testifying and bragging about setting up Julius Jones. I'm going to go find it real quick. So y'all keep commenting, you know, say your justice, say your little opinions to shit. You didn't read the transcripts. Bro, you don't know what I read. He's guilty. Okay, Steven. Great thought. That's great for you to think like that. Are any of y'all in Oklahoma that's talking about this case? Glenn, Steven, who is this other person? Y'all must be in Oklahoma. John, are y'all in Oklahoma? I'm hoping so, because y'all have a lot of stuff to say about this case. Like, y'all are there. So, if you heard from the board, this is the first time they've heard from Julius Jones. What kind of case is that? Let's be for real. Okay, see in the building. Yeah. What up, Daryl? What you think about this case? Give me your honest opinion, because you know it's just people in here is talking about he's guilty, but I swear they're not black, so they have no idea. I'm pretty sure everybody that said he's guilty has been white. If you're black and you think that he's guilty, can you come on here on the comments so we can kind of? I'm interested to see. I don't give a fuck about Julius Jones testifying. That does not mean he's guilty. It's way more evidence to be brought forward than just motherfuckers' testimony. Like, it is a lot of evidence that you can get from streets, from highways, from cars. Like, not just, oh, well, the evidence was at his house in his room. Nigga. Like, y'all are just, it sounds, if you don't have evidence without reasonable doubt, this is no one should be on death row. Exactly. That's what I'm talking about. Let's see your blind support for him. Blind support? Trust me, I have done hours and hours of research. Don't tell me what my support is. Please. Keep your opinion to your fucking self and speak for yourself. Thank you. Stephen Perry, what evidence? Dean. Oh, yeah, I got what you were saying, Daryl. Talking about blind to support. You sound like the people that was talking before we heard the Julius Jones defense. Talking about, oh, people giving the blind support for him, Black Lives Movement, and saying all this bullshit. Yo, bro, I'm tired of white people speaking on Black Lives Movement. For one, y'all are not black. Stop saying that shit. And you don't know what kind of support I have, so please just stay in your lane. You don't know who I am and what I'm capable of, so stay in your lane. Okay, people are out. Hours of research. What evidence are you fucking talking about? Oh, I can show you. I'm about to go to the link. Trust me, y'all need to do more research, because you know how many people are involved in this case and have did real research on this case? The same dude that Julius Jones was mentioning was the same dude bragging about setting him up. And I'm about to go find it real quick. Just give me 1 second. Because it's plain as day. And I'll even play the audio for it. Like, this nigga is trying to, oh my God, I just cannot stand some people. Oh my God. I think shit is just so plain and simple. Like, everything is not so simple. And it's multiple people getting set up for shit. It's so much. Y'all are blind to the fact that it is racism in the world. You're blind to the fact that it's been corruption on Black males for the longest. You're blind to the fact that just because somebody said something does not make it true. Okay? Okay. Fucking dumb. Shit. That shit does not make any sense to me. I need to really do real facts and understand why people would say some of the shit that they say. And go fuck if somebody just says something that doesn't mean anything. Evidence is evidence. That's why they have
Okay, it
evidence.
is now 12:27.
Fuck about what
The
somebody
meeting is
said.
Back in session. Before we vote, is there any discussion from the board members?
I have
Go ahead. Sure.
a couple of things. I'm sure that's not a surprise.
Thank you.
I want to talk just a little bit, and these are just my thoughts, and I'm one board member. We are faced with a claim of
I'll tell you what
actual
evidence
innocence, and
after
that
you
is
get
our
done
only
talking.
claim. So in order to grant mercy, that is what we have to consider. And, the governor sent this back to us to hear from Mr. Jones and to flesh this out more thoroughly. And I think we've done that. And I appreciate both sides. You're very good lawyers. You really are. And I know Ms. Bass, I might have seemed a little harsh, but you're a good lawyer. But what I'm disappointed in, I think, is that I didn't hear, other than innocence, I didn't hear mitigation. I didn't hear, I just didn't hear that. And that disappointed me. But to believe, in my opinion, to believe in Mr. Jones's theory of the case, you have to disbelieve every other piece of evidence in the case. Everything. Law enforcement, independent witnesses.
Not to interrupt, but the dude talking
physical evidence, and you have to
seems like he's old enough to been tied to this case.
His version over
So he's going to say a whole bunch of
evidence,
bullshit.
and I am very concerned that that's a near impossibility. And I'm concerned that Mr. Jones was not entirely truthful with us today.
Bro, I can literally
Because when
say
he said that about being in front of the jury, I knew that to be not true.
Anything. I can say Detroit Lions are going to win the Super Bowl. That doesn't make it true.
And written
like, what are you?
Statement, I'm sure, very thoroughly vetted by his attorneys. But his attorneys don't practice law in the state of Oklahoma. And those hearings are always outside the presence of the jury, so it doesn't taint the defendant. And he was not truthful with this board. It's about the truth here.
No, you may not. Nope. Just as a reminder, there is no more discussion from members of the public. Thank you.
That's all I have.
See
Any other discussion
see what
from
they
members of
doing
the
right
board?
now? Yeah, they don't want people
as a
to
reminder,
talk. They
for
don't
clemency
want
hearings, the way
nobody,
this is
no
going to go is we will
influence, no
vote,
nothing.
And then members of the
You
board
get
will exit,
25 minutes
followed by
of
members
your
of
defense,
Mr. House,
including the
family, and other
lawyers.
victims' representatives in the office of the
Fucked up.
Attorney General, followed by the legal counsel for Mr. Jones and members of Mr. Jones's family, and then members of the public and the media. And Mr. Bates will be directing that following departure of members of the board. We will, at the conclusion of this clemency hearing, reconvene tomorrow morning at 8:30 for the rest of the regularly scheduled November meeting for the Oklahoma Pardon and Parole Board. Is there any other discussion? Okay, Melinda, will you please call the vote?
Kelly Doyle, As I stated last month, I continue to believe that there is doubt in this case in which the ultimate punishment should not be utilized. So I'm yes for clemency.
Richard Smotherman.
No.
Larry
Hey,
Morris.
Mama Bees, you better stay in your place. I'll cut the audio off, nigga. Shut up.
Before I cast my vote, and I realize that the only thing I'm obligated to do is to say yes or no, but I think that the families on both sides are at least deserving of hearing what I have to say and hearing my opinions. All morning long, at least since 9 o'clock, we have heard discussions from both sides, both very well represented. One claiming that Mr. Jones is definitely guilty of murdering Mr. Howell. The other side presented an equally good argument saying that he is not guilty. There's one thing that I know of this case is that Mr. Jones was tried and convicted, and all the way through the appellate process, he has been unsuccessful in getting the case overturned. Ordinarily, during a parole hearing, we are charged with the responsibility of giving the inmates some choices about their future. In this particular case, it's been stepped up a notch in that we now have the responsibility of making a recommendation as to whether or not this young man even has a future. There are a couple of things that actually do trouble me. Not so much about his guilt or innocence, but it is mainly the disparity in sentencing. If Christopher Jordan is equally culpable in this murder and received on paper, a 30-year sentence, which in reality was a 15-year sentence, and I am certainly convinced that anyone who's familiar with the criminal justice system, even 20 years ago, would have been able to determine that that 30-year sentence would have only amounted to 15 years. So there is a huge disparity in the sentencing, and to give one person 15 years and then execute the second one, there is something inherently wrong in that decision, in my opinion. The other thing that I do know is that this board, even though it may or may not be our role to determine whether or not someone is guilty or innocent, we do have the authority to make a recommendation to the governor based on our own opinions as to whether or not this man is deserving of some mercy and some leniency in his sentencing. And at this point, I am convinced that he is deserving of that, and my vote is yes for clemency.
Adam Luck.
For the reasons previously stated at the commutation hearing, my vote is yes to recommend clemency.
Clemency is recommended.
Kyle, will you please explain the board's options under our administrative rules?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. According to the clemency hearing rules, it states the board will vote to deny or recommend clemency to the governor for the offender before the clemency hearing is adjourned. If clemency is recommended, the board may include a recommendation for commutation. The board may discuss the matter before voting. The board is not required to state reasons when they vote. That's the section on voting.
Is there any discussion?
No.
Do you need a motion? Okay. Hearing no discussion, I would make the motion to recommend, along with clemency, commuting the sentence to life with the possibility of parole.
Second.
Hearing a second from Mr. Morris. Belinda, would you please call the vote on the motion?
Kelly Doyle.
Yes.
Richard Smotherman.
No.
Larry Morris.
Yes.
Adam Luck,
Yes.
Motion to commute to life with the possibility of parole has been carried out by a vote of 3 to 4.
Thank you again, everybody, for being here. This concludes the clemency hearing. We will reconvene tomorrow morning at 8:30.
And there we have it. I think the justice system is corrupt. Yeah, pretty much. And that's what I'm trying to explain to everybody. I know a lot of people don't live these lives. You never been in danger. You never had cops around. You never had people harassing you with badges. I understand you don't really know what's going on, but the justice system is not for color people, Black people, Negroes, whatever you want to call us. It's not for us. So, but I'm happy that Julius Jones' case is being heard. Shit, that's all. I mean, I'm doing this for Julius Jones. This is the reason why I did the broadcast. So I hope everybody follows up, and if you can, do more research. I'm not saying that your research you've done is wrong. I'm saying do more research, because on Instagram and Twitter, they have a bunch of stuff about this case. And the more the research you do, the more you know that this is not right. There we go. Perfectly said. Perfectly said. I will go live tomorrow, since they said they will do it tomorrow in the morning. So if y'all want to, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube, follow us on Facebook. Everywhere you're watching, just follow, like, and we'll be here tomorrow. We might do like a special Julius Jones thing tonight. But y'all look out for that. Okay. But I appreciate everybody that was tuning in. Whether you're going for Julius Jones or not. But y'all have a good day. Be safe out there.